I'm David Gadarian, and this is The Flip Story, the place where human potential meets market creation, and every conversation rewrites what's possible. Imagine growing up in a household of professors, a world where education isn't just a career path, it's a religion. You're raised on a steady diet of high-level social theory and Dostoevsky. You spend years honing a mind that can dissect human behavior at a molecular level, eventually earning a PhD that offers you a lifetime of safety within the quiet walls of academia. But then the flip happens. You decide to leave that ivory tower behind. You take the heightened intellect and drop it into the high pressure world of global business. You trade the classroom for the boardroom. Along the way, you become an intellectual nomad, chasing art and traveling the globe, not just seeing the world, but to see if your theories hold up. Today's guest is a social psychologist, a strategist, and a CMO recognized for her ability to cut through the noise by leading with human curiosity. Needless to say, I'm very excited to have today's guest on the show and go deep on her journey. Dr. Jasmine Martirossian, welcome to The Flip Story.
Wow, David, that's an amazing intro. Do I recognize that woman? Very moving. Thank you.
All good, all well-deserved. I'm really excited about diving in. So before we get into some of the details on the show here, why don't you help set the stage by telling us about your now?
Right now, I lead Strategy Arc, where we help organizations improve on a number of levels, from building high-performance teams, and we rely on Gallup strengths, to working with boards on strategic planning, and we also deliver high, best of the best, state-of-the-art, effective marketing and organizational restructuring services.
All right. Well, we're going to take a pretty big journey from where you are now to where you started. So let's get into it. So Jasmine, someone who's raised in the church of academia, leaving that world is a massive identity shift. I would assume that's the case. Can you tell us the moment you realized that you didn't just want to study the world, but you actually wanted to get into the driver's seat of the market itself? Was there a catalyst moment? Was there what drove this?
It's a great question. I think part of it comes from my mentality and mindset, because I do not, I try, and because I try not to live in a world of dichotomy of either or, but I try to do both, right? So the work I've done in academia has been extremely helpful for me in the corporate setting. In fact, my doctoral dissertation was on strategic planning, group and team dynamics, and board governance. So that lent itself really well to the transition, but it was not accidental. I'm a very action-oriented person, and while I love academia and really love teaching at Northeastern University, I was ranked number one by students in the Department of Sociology during the years I taught for 4 years. Well, I loved it, absolutely cherished it. I like action. I like results. I like movement. And that lent itself really well to the corporate side of things. And I made I agree with you. It's a pivot, but it's also being change readiness. Like in today's world, if somebody's not pivoting or is not change ready, they're going to stagnate and die.
Die. That's pretty stark.
Well, it's stark. I mean, I think we die not when we're physically dead. We die the moment we stop learning. We die the moment where we completely settle. We die the moment where we're going only for safety and not challenging ourselves. Again, it's a mindset thing.
Right. And you seem to live that, which is
I
really
love
fun.
it. And, it doesn't come from satisfaction. So as an evangelist of Gallup strengths, my number one strength is achiever, which means I'm very driven to keep accomplishing things. And it's never that I'm satisfied with myself. It actually comes from dissatisfaction. It's not as if I ever wake up in the morning and I go, wow, I have arrived. That's never the case. In fact, what drives me to achieve is the dissatisfaction the need to learn more, to accomplish more, because there is so much out there in the world that we haven't seen or learned or done. And so to settle and to feel really content seems like a sense of injustice to ourselves, to our, God-given potential.
All right, so I want to stay in this moment here for a little bit longer, if you don't mind. So
Big, go ahead.
we're you you go through, you get super educated to the point where you're a PhD, and from an identity perspective, when you start to teach, I would presume that was so much of your identity at that moment, and then you make this shift to working in the corporate environment. Did you feel like was it just an easy shift, or was it you had to really put one skin down and pick up another skin, or what was the kind of move there, and what were some of the challenges that you were kind of, it may have been just raw enthusiasm, it may have been something else, I don't know. So what was happening there?
First of all, it's a very tough transition to make for two reasons. Most people are not willing to make it because you've invested so much
Right.
into that work. You arrive at a PhD, that's a huge accomplishment. And it also gives you safety, right, of this academic progression. You can end up in a tenure-track position, you have employment for a lifetime, you'll get sabbaticals. That is the Ivory Tower. One of the sad things about US higher ed is that it has not been innovating enough, which is why a lot of higher ed institutions are imploding now. The system that we have in academia really has not changed in like 300 years in the US. So that's one of the things. I'm a huge believer that you have to leave while you're at the top because it takes courage to drive that change. If you're not, I live what I evangelize. I talk about the importance of change, about the importance of evolving. So to your question, was it a identity thing? Like I remember the last class I taught in a classroom with about 120 students, a state-of-the-art classroom at Northeastern. I asked myself, is this the last class I'll ever teach? But then I also answered myself, I'll be teaching lots of other classes. Like it's not the end. You have to look into morphing into something. One of the most impactful books I've ever read that does not get as much publicity as it should because it's an absolute business classic is Charles B. Handy's book called The Age of Unreason. And he's the person that coined the phrase portfolio careers. So from a very young age, both with my personal inclination and with him giving it a kind of a label, I have been planning for a portfolio career. You have to be change ready because there is so much change outside of your control. You have to be well versed to step into other situations. And the happiest people, by the way, are those who do not tie their identity to their job because I have so many other identities, right? Fundamentally, I'm an active human being, but I'm also a mother, a wife, a traveler. There are all these other things, self-identities that I have. And when you don't tie your identity to that one thing, it's actually scientifically proven. Those are happier people. Uh, Whereas when your identity becomes just one thing, God forbid that's taken, people implode.
How long did it take you to figure that out? At what age did you feel like you is that something that you knew early in, like, high school, middle school, or was that something that came later to have that kinda depth and the
So
portfolio
I,
readiness?
I'm very lucky and I'm very grateful to my parents for who were academics and had summers available for travel. I would think that traveling to different countries, different worlds, different cultures really made me see the world in a different light. To see how much opportunity there is, how much possibility there is, how much we don't know, that innate curiosity. I'm a very, very, very curious person, like innately curious. And I sometimes, laugh at myself. I do things I don't necessarily need to do. But to me, that creates then other mental shortcuts that come in handy and I capitalize on. So I can't say it was ever this, um, conscious decision where you sit down and make that decision to be a certain way, but it becomes your identity. That's what it is, right? The readiness to explore something new, you know.
Right. And
That's
I think this is a neat space of this, super accomplished and then moving into a different space and the risk, the capital risk, the emotional risk. Um, it's a curious kind of moment, and not everyone's able to achieve that. So if you don't mind, so you're in academia, obviously you have to put in a lot of time, a lot of energy into the relationships and the dynamics that are there. What was the reaction when you shared with your academia colleagues you're going to leave the pristine area of Northeastern and you're going to come into the world of business?
downright incredulous and hostile. My academic advisors, whom I love dearly, who have unfortunately passed away at this point, were shocked. Only one of my doctoral advisors, who was on my dissertation committee, who was the department chair of sociology, he kind of knew me and understood me differently. He's like, yeah, I totally get it. My immediate advisors thought that I was wasting a tremendous academic future, that I was just taking steps that were, irrevocable and terrible. But, that academic background has actually helped me, and I've continued publishing, and it's helped me with my writing, and it helps me in today's work. So I have not seen or viewed that as a problem. And in fact, very often I have taken a step that has been kind of counterintuitive. At times I've walked into an entirely different industry, completely consciously. And then I've also straddled the world of academia with corporate every now and then. At one point from Northeastern, I was recruited to go into Lesley University. And at the time, I'm so sorry, from Intratech to Lesley University. And at the time, I had offers from competitors of Intratech, staying in the same industry. And I loved Intratech, unbelievable place. And again, I stayed there 6 years. I could have stayed there another 16 or 26 because I just love that company. It's like one of the best examples of a change-driven organization. Yet I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and went back to academia thinking, hey, and I talked about it with my husband, and he's like, well, maybe there is a meaning. You need to challenge yourself with this, because the safer move would be to go to Intratech's competitor. And the reason why I also wanted to leave, British headquartered company, where the title manager means a lot. US VPs were taking directions from me because I was in a cross-divisional global role. But for me to get the next title up, right, I had to move either to Houston or London. And so you have to push yourself into discomfort. So I left a very highly comfortable situation to go then back into an academic environment. And if you ask me, I think I pulled miracles there, moving very fast, helping completely relaunch Lesley University's website, which I stayed there 3 years. And it's interesting, and I was recruited to go to PTC from there. In the last week, that website was ranked number 7 among the top 15 U.S. higher ed sites, and there are 3,000 U.S. higher ed institutions. So one of the greatest honors. And we had not applied for any kind of, there was no application. We did not pay fees because, a lot of those awards are pay for play.
Right.
Nothing. Completely on its own, a very positive shocker. So
Amazing.
my point is, get comfortable with discomfort.
I want to talk a little on discomfort. So you had alluded to this just a moment ago. We were talking about some of the social norms and leaving one place and having some hard conversations around why are you leaving. You should stay. You have, there's all, and I think for a lot of people, they make a different choice. They choose to stay. They kind of take that pressure and they say, I'm well liked, whatever the logic is. Um, so do you mind just sharing a little on kind of one, some of your feelings around getting that kind of feedback in that moment? Because obviously you made the leap. You said, no, I'm going. And two, maybe some advice for others in a similar kind of situation, in a similar kind of moment in their own kind of timeline.
First of all, I can respect people who make those choices, right? You have to be in the shoes of the person to know what drives them. And there, it could be very well be the right decision for a given person. So I'm not here to judge anyone. Absolutely not. But I can speak for myself. And then there are some dynamics that I've noticed because, for instance, at Mercury, I was leading, but was both chief marketing officer and chief people officer, which I don't even put on LinkedIn because that's too confusing. Though just a few weeks ago, Harvard Business School, I was invited to a lecture by Professor Felix, I think Oberholzer, and he was talking how the right way to do it would be to combine the role, chief marketing officer, chief people officer, because it deals with people on the outside and inside. So I've interviewed tons of executives, lots of people over the years, and I noticed certain dynamics. People who would stay in one place for a very, very long time, they were really not comfortable negotiating their pay. And I always noticed huge salary compression, huge. So even though they're trading a lot when they're staying in one place, their pay does not go get, you know, grow in line with the market. So there's a very true economic component to that. Now here, I'm not kind of advocating for position jumping, right? So there should be a balance. When somebody leaves a role every year, that's an entirely different issue. But when somebody's there for 20 years, very often those people have a very hard time also adjusting to a new setting or being kind of learning and agile. And the other thing is the roles that I've had across different organizations, I've learned so much. It's been absolutely enriching. Like I cannot even imagine, a reality where I would not have those learnings. And it's not just textbook. You can read textbooks all you want, but when it comes to real life application, things inevitably are different. Is the human dynamics, the setup, the approaches, and every time it's made me a better executive. And it's interesting. I was speaking on another podcast literally a couple of days ago, and I said, even though let's say I've held the vice president of marketing title several times across different organizations, I've never done the same job. Never. So it's not as if you go and replicate something. You have to look at the context of the organization. You have to look the state where it's at. You have to look at its maturity. You have to look at the culture. Because if you go and try to bring the same recipe book to this place, you will not succeed. So that's a huge issue. And a lot of the times I've also found when they place a position description, even the organization doesn't know what it really needs. They think they need something.
Right.
But what's helped me with my background, with my diversity is like really delving deeper and uncovering things that are not really meeting the eye. And you're in marketing, so I'll give you a good marketing example. Like marketing cannot be viewed in isolation. And frankly, I believe that marketers have done a lousy job, like literally a lousy job of marketing their profession. Because today, anybody with a keyboard thinks of themselves as a marketer. But in one multinational organization, I worked very closely with one of the divisional sales leaders, and there we had 50% growth in organic inbound leads, right? And in my last three corporate roles, I've actually even refused to report on any leads other than organic inbound because it's all made up illusion, right? MQLs are an illusion. So people just don't have the courage to say that. But anyway, the organic inbound was up by 50%. Sales were up by 27%, which is remarkable year on
Yep.
year.
That's massive growth. Yep.
However, revenue was up by a good fat 0. So it's not a situation that you have to think like holistically to step back and say, oh, marketing's failing, sales is failing, because that's not the case. But that would be most organizations' default. So you know what I did? I went to the actual lab to see what's happening there and spent a few days there. So around 10 a.m., when the lab is supposed to be at full capacity, it was mostly working at 10%. Around 2, 3 p.m., it was working at 50, 60%. And we're talking about a state-of-the-art facility, like world class. And then you look, they have a gigantic backlog. And you talk to the lab leader and they go, well, one shift is not enough. It takes 6 hours on the average test. So 3 hours are lost and we have a backlog. I'm like, okay, approve overtime. And this person is then under the illusion that they can't approve overtime. So I had to go to the CFO and the controller and ask them to do modeling. And it showed that. So do you see how it's a different thinking and problem solving? Rather
Right.
than pumping up more leads, which actually in this case would hurt because it hurts the brand. When you non-deliver, people remember that.
Right.
So
Okay.
the solutions. So my point is that I bring that kind of holistic thinking, different experiences, looking at things from a different perspective into the work I do, and it really makes a difference. So, by the way, my PhD is also interdisciplinary, right? It's not, again, it's not just like, oh, biology, chemistry. The real stuff happens in interdisciplinarity. And the same is true in marketing, in leadership, in governance,
Right. And in life.
and in life, in everything.
So one more life question, just coming
Sure.
back to this. You and I think this is applicable to a lot of people. And I'm just curious how this landed in your life. So you come from an academic family. You'd mentioned both of your parents are professors. How did they respond when you said, "I'm leaving academia"?
Um, I'm sure maybe there was a little bit of disappointment, but my parents are the types of people that will like walk into the ocean for me, right? There is this unreserved love. So while I'm sure there was some inward disappointment and mild questioning, they have been very supportive and very proud, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a mindset thing. Of course, you naturally want your kids to continue, right? And it happens in businesses too. Only 10% of businesses, and there are some other dynamics there, survive into the third generation, family-owned businesses.
A family business is hard.
Tough.
It's, I think, and I'm sure you saw this in academia, which was your family business. It's hard to shed some of those constructs. That was really why I was asking that question, was to kind of get some perspective on someone who managed to, I don't want to say successfully leave something, but you did. I mean, you left academia and you made a concerted choice, and that can be hard too.
But I
Um,
mean, I've continued like publishing, for instance, books. I'm working on 2 books right now, so you don't just like it comes with you. It becomes part of the mosaic of your life, of your makeup. It just adds a dimension, makes you more like 3, 4D.
so okay, so let's make a little pivot here, and what we're focused on now. So seem to have a really good grasp of yourself, what's interesting to you. You also seem to have a lot of appreciation for discomfort being, would you say discomfort's a necessary evil or it's normal?
I honestly don't see ever achieving something really big just with it coming too easily,
Yeah,
with complete ease. And it's a very interesting phenomenon in our society because, you have corporations like Staple, they have the red button. It's easy, right? It's like a cultural thing. We want everything. Our children are raised with the ethos, oh, make it fun. Everything's fun. And but a lot of the time, things that we do and accomplish require a very focused, lasting, dedicated effort. And there is really no social setting that kind of actively talks about it, because then everybody wants to make it easy. And there are interesting constructs we're dealing with technology. I mean, AI, you can type in and get tons of answers instantaneously. It will write just about anything for you, though. Like, I have developed a new brain filter that looks to see, is this AI written or human written, right? So that, but we need to apply ourselves. Like, I joke about it, but now for like 317 days, because Duolingo counts it, I've been learning German.
Okay.
And I've had German in the past, and I've worked at TÜV Süd, which is a German corporation. I've spent a lot of time with 3 different companies, living several weeks at a time in Germany. And I know some German, but for some whatever reason, I am pushing myself to learn German, though I seemingly really do not have a discernible reason why I'd be doing that. But of the European, because I also know some French, Spanish, and Italian, and maybe those languages are even more appealing to me, but I'm choosing the harder one because it's more difficult to just, again, push myself, because you have to, that muscle of pushing yourself is something that we have to develop.
So how do you bring that into the work that you're doing now? This is the Jasmine theory of push, and this idea that things are easy and that natively we want things to be easy. People tend to, my words, tend to avoid the hard. Um, and how do you bring that mentality into the work you're doing with your clients?
So you have to, convince people to do that, right? It starts with communication, and then you have to be good about breaking things down into smaller pieces. I do, if I were to give like the whole big vision, most people will say it's not doable. But I've proven over and over and over again that it's doable. You just have to break it down into smaller pieces. It helps me because, again, based on Gallup strengths, my number 5 is strategic. I have a ranger as number 7. So I look for patterns, right? And if you can break down, I have futuristics as 4. So if I can break down the patterns and present it that way and tell the narrative story and explain the why. That's the other thing. Most people do not go behind the why and manage expectations. It's much easier to pull off. Because if you come out and say to someone, hey, if you do this, it will take an X amount of effort, most people will walk away from it. But even in my personal life, I have accomplished certain things that when I look back, I go like, how did I do that? And honestly, if I had thought of that as a whole, and even this movement, right, from academia to corporate life, most people would think of that as not doable. But if you do it in small pieces and push yourself, it gets done. And I try to, again, thinking of across disciplines. I was once with a big multinational. We were launching corporate websites, and made the mistake of selecting the 2 big outside of English countries, which would be Germany and France, to do their complex websites. And the company had smaller presence in the Netherlands and Italy and many other countries. So, and there were interesting conflicts between those countries, egos, competitions. Anyway, any complexity you can heap into one place was there. And we're able to kind of work through that, but it was a lot of tension. Then after that, we did Italy and the Netherlands, and that was way easier. And when we did the Netherlands, I was in Amsterdam over the weekend, right? And I went to the Rijksmuseum, and Peter Paul Rubens, big, his canvases are usually huge,
Okay.
gigantic. And I'd always seen only his huge canvases. And Rijksmuseum has a huge collection of those huge canvases. But then in a room next to it, I saw, which I'd never seen before, an entire room of Peter Paul Rubens's canvases done in really small scale. And that would make the light bulb go in my head. That's why Italy and Netherlands for the project were so much easier. We would have been so much better advised to do the smaller ones, to get the learnings on those and then have the proof of success in those and then transfer to the bigger countries. And see how everything is interconnected?
Yeah, that's an interesting insight as well. I think you, and you're right. And so that's all right. So let's talk about that. When we talk about flipping how to solve problems, a lot of people tend to they tend to do what you just described. They have a set of problems. They're going to focus on the biggest one first, the meatiest one, the hardest one, um, and then they're going to cascade all of those. I don't know if those are learnings or if those become edicts after that. Of obviously, we did the biggest one, and now everything has to follow suit. Whereas what you've just defined is that insight. Have you been able to deploy that insight repeatedly going forward?
Absolutely, because actually starting small for any change management project, and it's something I live by. If you start something small, then you can create a snowball effect and you're working from success. You have proof of success and it snowballs and builds on it. And then it's much easier to get buy-in from your stakeholders, from the leadership, from everyone. Now, a lot of the time, I've seen major corporate initiatives fail just because they start way too big, you know? And that's an issue. I know without naming people or organizations, and I'm a huge believer in Kaizen, right? It's the Japanese philosophy of driving small incremental improvements all the time. And I'm grateful and blessed to have been to Japan, right? I'd go there anytime again. And for instance, in Japan, when you get up from the restaurant table, you're not likely to leave a crumpled napkin. You'll probably fold it and leave it nicely, even though it's dirty at this point, because it's the culture of doing small things really well, and the environment affects you. Now, so I'm a huge believer in the philosophy of Kaizen, and I approach my own life that way, everything. But in one organization, the leader wanted to do Kaizen, and that meant taking people off work, creating all this extra work, whatever. All of a sudden, that was met with hostility by employees and silent sabotage. And to them, it became a dirty word because it was like too huge. Now, if you formed a small team, did certain small improvements, and built on it, that would just snowball so much better. Because again, remember, success begets success. And very often, failure, unless you fail fast, learn from it, and move on, begets failure.
I think that's a good lesson for everyone. This idea of how to approach challenges and problems and not necessarily try to to get too big too fast in terms of ambition around solving those challenges. So, you know, kind of related to this or maybe totally outside of it, I know you talk a lot about outside in thinking, and I guess, you know, maybe to start off, what do you mean by that? And then a follow-up question around that would be, do you feel your diverse background is makes you both between your academia coming in, your immense appetite to travel, do you think you're more predisposed to be receptive to that concept?
I'm sure it helps, though it's funny. I was talking with the university president yesterday, and we both came to the agreement that very often a lot of academics, a lot of faculty members are not as open-minded as one would think, because there is this, oh, I know everything, but I'm the top expert in this. And that really kind of affects their ability to be learning, which is counterintuitive, right? So that's a factor as well. But I do think that my desire for push, for sometimes even seeking that discomfort, putting myself into challenging situations, that helps. And then you definitely learn from outside. You learn from absolutely everything. My grandmother used to say, and even when I was a little kid, that she learned something new every day from everyone, even from little kids. And that is so true. Like very often, even looking at little kids to see how they're processing the world is huge. And there are some amazing examples of that. Moscow in Russia has this Ostankino Tower. And when you stand underneath that tower, you see that it's like moving. It's very tall. At the time when it was built, they aimed it to be the tallest tower in the world. That was like, pride, right?
Right.
And so the engineer got this assignment, except it was very difficult because the winds were staggering in that location. And it had to be in that location. And the engineer was having a very hard time coming up with the design. All his calculations were showing that the tower would implode. Then, of course, Toronto built its tower, the CN Tower, and that became like 13 meters longer or something like that. So, and CN Tower is in a different location, right, by the waterside front, and does not have the same wind issues. So anyway, this engineer was struggling and struggling until he saw his 11-year-old son, who had drilled holes inside the cubes, who was playing with his own cubes, had drilled holes in the middle and had put a string, and that held his cubes. That became the design of the Ostankino Tower, because there are now 60 very thick wires, extremely thick, that go through the middle, through the core of it. And no matter the winds, it stands up,
Huh. Outside in.
outside in.
Love
You,
it.
you,
All right. You and we had an opportunity, I should say, I had an opportunity to benefit from you doing a Strength Finders review of me. And I really appreciate that. I
my pleasure.
definitely got a lot of really good, strong perspective on, I guess, what I would call my own internal market. Um, and I know you're a big advocate around Strength Finders. And I guess my question to you is, how does how does this approach help you with your clients in terms of how they understand themselves and their teams, their dynamics, their organizations? And I guess a subset of that, I think a lot of folks come into these types of environments, Strength Finders and otherwise, and there's just a maybe because you're a practitioner, you don't feel it as much, or maybe you see it even more so. There's a lot of resistance, a lot of concern, a lot of maybe even fear of what am I going to find? Is this helpful? Is this going to help? How do you help people kind of move past that and into here's your opportunity to use these discoveries in a positive way to the betterment of the journey you're all kind of going on?
Sure. First of all, Strength Finder is highly scientific. And I've taken every possible test that's out there. DISC, Plum, Wonderlic, you name it. Nothing has shown the results as accurately as Strengths Finder, because it's like looking in the mirror and knowing thyself. I don't, there is over 37 or something million people have already taken the test. There is 50 plus years of research behind the test. It's highly scientific, and it also helps change your reality, in that all of corporate America and corporate Canada, for that matter, works from weaknesses, right? Calm performance review time, which, by the way, it's much better to have consistent conversations. Managers of people feel compelled to talk about, oh, you're weak on this, you need to improve that. And so what it leaves people with is like clipped wings rather than air under their wings to take off and fly. And no emphasis is made corporately on people's strengths, really. Whereas when we work from people's strengths, we unleash people's true talents. Now, most people do not even know their full talents. And by the way, Gallup research shows, and Gallup is the most authoritative polling company out there, right? That 70% of American employees are completely disengaged. Now, that translates to billions of lost revenue for organizations. It means 70% of the people are kind of, sort of going through the motions of showing up and not really applying themselves. And it also has other costs. These are the same people that consume antidepressants. These are the same people that develop coronary artery disease. These are the same people that die of heart attacks because the stress is huge and it's counterproductive because leaders want people to be most productive, yet by not focusing on strengths, they actually reduce people's productivity. So when you focus on people's strengths and when a person knows what their strengths are and knows what that cocktail of strengths is, when they lean on them, they will be way more effective. Strengths are our innate talents. So it allows you to unleash your innate talents, strengths. If we're working in areas, and sometimes, so we're working in areas of strengths, this is where people fall into a state of flow, where they don't even notice time, where they're so engaged in what they're doing, where they're not going through the motions. So it's a huge lost corporate opportunity not to align teams through strengths. Also, it helps improve communications. When you know what a person's strengths are, you can communicate with them better. For instance, a C-suite colleague of mine had input. People with input, they like to collect a lot of information. I jokingly call them information hoarders. But as a result, if they also like to share information in a desire to be helpful. But think of it this way. If I did not know that this individual had input, I would think that the person doesn't trust me or my judgment. Whereas because they would ask for more data and information.
Right.
By knowing that this person has input, if I showered them and drowned them in information, I had their immediate buy-in because I satisfied their innate need. That's how their brain is wired. Where a lot of CEOs have a strength called restorative, call them fixers of broken things. They're wired to constantly look for things to improve and fix. So if you're a direct report of that person and you've just laid a gold egg and you're very full of yourself with that accomplishment, you go to the person and they'll say, "Oh, great job, thank you." And then they'll point out the next thing. So this is not that they don't appreciate you. This is because they're wired that way, right? So if we understand how people around us are wired, our leaders, our team members, you become so much more effective in communicating with them. Somebody who has context, right? It means they need to know background information. Their why includes knowing more peripheral data. So if you're trying to explain a corporate initiative to them, don't say, "And we're launching this initiative." You have to kind of customize it to them. Then you'll have better buy-in. And I could go on about the strengths. So when we work from strengths, we maximize the outcomes infinitely.
Well, I can see as someone who managed to flip your own story why you'd have passion around this topic and why this particular tool is such a lift for you and how you think, and it seems to align very well. I can hear your passion around it as well. So
Thank
that's
you.
a lot of fun. All right. So Jasmine, here at the show, we're building what we like to call not so much the cocktail of human potential, but the recipe book of human potential. Um, it's a big feature on the show, and so if there's maybe one or multiple essential ingredients that you would say folks would need to have in their kind of flipped pantry, what would that be?
Have an ultimate goal, like strive towards something, and remember that the journey itself, cherish the journey more than the destination. Uh, that's very important, and most people miss the point. In fact, among people who earn PhDs, it's a well-established phenomenon that once they once they earn their PhD, a lot of them kind of fall into deep depression. You know why? Because all of a sudden their goal is achieved and they're left with nothing. So there is this letdown. But have an overarching goal always, right? Work towards that. And then be also agile. The other thing is a lot of its planning is really important, but you have to be agile to notice something because very often an opportunity will come out of nowhere. And I am shocked how many people dismiss the new opportunity only because it doesn't fit their preordained plan. And when you don't have the agility to, grasp the opportunity that's slapping you in the face, that could be a very badly missed situation. So you have to have goals, you have to have plans, but you also have to be agile. Like, try to keep that balance.
Love that. And I'd say, cherish the journey over the goal. You certainly live that, as we've seen today.
Thank
Uh,
you.
really, really fun. So I think as we're getting ready to wrap out here, how can people find you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. So under my name, and it's LinkedIn dot in / Jasmine dash Martirossian. They can send me emails at jasmine at strategyarc.com. They can find me also through our website, strategyarc.com. And my travel blog is travelchasingart.com.
I love it. I'll put all those links in the show notes for sure. So this was
Thank you.
absolutely amazing. We started here with the journey from a house of professors, and we end with a real sharp look at a global strategist who is using all kinds of tools to decode markets. I think if there's a nice lesson among many here, your past, definitely your past life doesn't define you. Really seems to be the fuel to get to your next flip. Really, really appreciate you sharing everything today. And with that, I'm David Gadarian, and just remember, it's all about the story we tell, the strategy we use, and the flips that move us forward. See you next time.
Thank you, David.
My
It's been a
pleasure.
pleasure.